everyone. You are most welcome to the 17th episode of the Green Talk Show, brought to you by my Tree Initiative. I'll repeat that again because there was some noise somewhere in the background. You're very welcome to the 17th episode of the Main Tree Initiative Green Talk Show. And today we have an amazing topic and amazing guest speakers. And first of all, let me just say a little bit about myself. My name is Rose Kopsinge, and I'm a friend of my Tree Initiative. And I was representing at pre-COP 26 and COP 26 in Glasgow. I'm just back from COP 26. And maybe if we get some time, I can share a little bit about what I think, how COP 26 went. So for all our viewers, those ones who have joined us for the first time, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask my guests to mute themselves. One of my guests, please mute yourself so that we're able to go on. Yeah, so I was saying that this is the 17th episode of the Green Talk Show brought to you by My Tree Initiative. And My Tree Initiative is a non-for-profit, youth-led organization that has a vision to see communities thriving through a healthy green cover by educating and inspiring young people, children, and planting and caring for trees. So, as I already mentioned, this is the 17th episode. There have been 16 episodes before this one. And last week, there was an episode on quality education for climate action, and it was hosted by a lovely host, Haula. And today, we are going to be talking about building resilience and global support for climate change. And I think building resilience and today's topic is very crucial and exciting because we've just come back from COP26, and it will be amazing to see how building resilience and collaboration to build climate action plays a role in Uganda specifically. So my guests, the first guest today is His Excellency Richard Nelson, who is a USAID Uganda Mission Director and was a Deputy Coordinator for Power Africa, a program I personally love and have been following for a long time. And Richard is also a lawyer in making. So Richard, please say hi and introduce yourself a little bit to the audience.
Hey, everyone. My name is Richard Nelson, and as Rose indicated, I am the Mission Director for USAID here in Uganda. And for those who don't know, which probably very few of you don't know this, but USAID is the lead development agency for the US government. And so USAID has been in Uganda for 60 years, well, 59 years, almost as long as Uganda has been a country. So USAID and Uganda go a long ways back, and I'm very, very happy to be here. I've been here in Uganda for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in January. And most of that has been COVID, but I'm very happy to be here. We've enjoyed it very much. And I'm happy to be with you tonight.
All right. Thanks, Richard. Thanks for joining the show today. And our appreciation to USAID for supporting Uganda and being a great friend of Uganda, especially in this time when we're fighting a number of many socioeconomic and health challenges and all the programs that the program and the mission is providing to the country in collaboration. So meanwhile, as I go to my next guest who has an issue with the connectivity, I'll just mention that as we go on with the show, feel free to comment, to ask questions, to provide input through the comment section on our Facebook, and also share the link with all your friends to come and join the talk show and listen to this educative and fun conversation. So Mr. Paul, I don't know if you're there, but my second guest is Mr. Paul Asimwe, who is a program officer in charge of environment and climate at the Swedish Embassy in Uganda. And Mr. Paul is joining to represent His Excellency Maria Håkansson, the Swedish ambassador to Uganda. Mr. Paul, you're very welcome. If your connectivity is now okay, please introduce yourself, say hi and introduce yourself. Okay, I'll give it a few seconds. If he's not able to respond, we'll see how to move forward. And I think for as you saw our poster, we are also expecting a third guest, who is Miss Sarah Kagingo. Ms. Sarah Kagingo is the Principal Press Secretary, Office of the Speaker of Parliament, Republic of Uganda, and she's also a board member, Private Sector Foundation. I think she'll be joining us soon. She's still traveling, so she may join us during the conversation. So as we wait for Mr. Paul Asimwe to sort the connectivity issue, I'll just go through and give a little bit of a background before we dive in deep into the conversation today with Richard, who so far is the only guest that we have for different technical issues. So yeah, I'll start by giving just a short background. As all of you who are joining us or viewing, and those that will view later on YouTube, you know that Uganda is a less developed country and is faced with numerous socioeconomic, political, and health challenges like youth unemployment, low education levels, poor health systems and infrastructure. And now we have COVID that has hit the economy. Sorry, Mr. Paul, can you please mute a little bit? Thank you. Yeah, as I was saying that Uganda's economy is suffering from a number of issues, socioeconomic and political issues. And now due to COVID-19 came in and also put our economy to test, our health systems to test. And a number of young people, local communities have lost jobs, have lost lives, have lost loved ones, have lost breadwinners. And as you know, it may take us a lot of time to recover. If I had the chance or the opportunity or the powers to say that we have enough of the challenges, maybe we shouldn't have more, I would do that. But unfortunately, I don't have power to stop issues like climate change that has come to torment, especially the least developed countries, the poor countries. Climate change has come has been there for a long time, but now it's manifesting a lot in countries like Uganda that depend a lot on rain-fed agriculture, but also have limitations in terms of capacity, finances, infrastructure, systems, and policies. So climate change is an existential threat. Most of you know, you may be knowing about it, but it's brought about mainly by the rich countries that continue emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and causing the average temperatures to rise. And once that happens, in Uganda, we've seen that is being manifested through increased magnitude, frequency, and intensity of floods. For example, in Kasese, on River Nyamwamba and River Mubuku, the landslides in eastern Uganda, in Bududa. You know about the droughts that are increasing in frequency and magnitude in Karamoja region that was already initially dry, but it's becoming enhanced. You know, the droughts in Isindro and all over the country. And as you understand, is that our local communities, our young people, including ourselves, we are suffering mostly from the effects that come with droughts, increased droughts and floods and landslides and everything. So, and we came back from COP26 was finalized over the weekend, last week. And there were discussions, mixed reactions, mixed feelings about the achievements. But and now that's why today we are here to talk about how can we build resilience? How can the global community come together to build resilience of the most vulnerable communities in Uganda? And we have, as you already heard, we have our Richard Nelson, who is the USAID Uganda Mission director, and I'll be asking him questions. The conversation is going to be more interactive, and feel free to send in questions as we go into the discussion. So so far, our other guests are still not here. So I'll just continue with Richard. And Richard, I think with your experience having worked with Power Africa, but also now being in Uganda, coming at a very crucial time, I mean, a very tricky time during the pandemic, but at least I know you've seen the situation, you're on the ground, you know what communities are going through in the country. So I would like to start by asking you, what does community resilience mean to you and mean to the USAID mission? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. Actually, before we get started, I'm curious. I can't see from my screen about how many people do we have following right now. Do you know?
So the numbers keep dropping and going up. I think it's connection problems and people are VPN. So I was looking at it like 10, and then they went back to 3, and now they're just going back up, just like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get more.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate this. And I have to say, even before I get started answering questions, I just want to commend you and your My Tree initiative for being thoughtful about this issue and for trying to raise awareness around this issue. It's impressive that young people are really taking such actions. I think it sets a great example for the rest of us who are not so young, and I think it's really commendable. And so I'm happy to be a part of this and to support your efforts tonight, because it is an important issue, and it's one that, as you know, the United States is conflicted over. I mean, there are many, many, many people in the United States who are strong advocates for adapting to climate change and dealing with climate change. And we have a president right now who believes in trying to solve this problem. And so the current administration is very focused on trying to solve this problem. This president is the first one to actually name a special envoy for climate change, who is John Kerry. And maybe you had a chance to meet him at COP. And that's an indication of the priority that the U.S. government is placing on climate change. But it's difficult. It's a tough question, because in the United States, there's a lot of people who are not convinced that A, it's a problem, B, that it's human activity that's causing the problem, and C, even if it is, that other priorities are more important. Economic priorities, social priorities outweigh this. So there's a lot of layers of debate and a lot of challenging discussions that are going on in the United States. But again, having said that, it is a priority for the U.S. government. Therefore, it's a priority for USAID. And we're taking it very seriously here in Uganda. And I think it's important for everyone, for the Ugandans and those of us development partners who are here, to do all we can to help Uganda really face this challenge, because as you pointed out, Uganda is dealing with the effects of climate change. Every day we're seeing an increase in these disasters. We're conducting studies on these disasters and where they might be occurring, and they are related to climate changing. And as you pointed out, so much of the economy of Uganda is based on agriculture, that you've got huge portions of the population of Uganda that are on the razor's edge. And it doesn't take much to take these vulnerable people who are subsistence farming to fall into very catastrophic poverty levels with one drought or one flood. And so we're talking about the impacts here in Uganda are are really threatening, and something we need to be concerned about. So it is a priority for us, and what we're trying to do is we're actually right in the middle of kind of recalibrating our portfolio to see what we can do to work with Uganda to help address this problem. For the last 4 or 5 years, we have not had any, well, or very, very little climate change funding. So we've had to work around that. We have some biodiversity programming, and I can talk about that a little bit more later. But from a climate standpoint, we've done little bits and pieces here and there throughout our programs, but it has not had the focus that it's needed. So right now we're trying to figure out what can we do. We're trying to get more funding to be able to address some of these issues. I will point out at COP, the U.S. government announced our new PREPARE initiative, which is the President's Emergency Action Plan for Adaptation and Resilience. And it's modeled after Power Africa. And the idea is that it's a multi-agency, U.S. agency effort to try and tackle climate change in the same way that Power Africa is a multi-agency initiative to tackle the problem of electricity in Africa. But this PREPARE initiative is global, and it has to be, because climate change is a global problem. And so just a couple of things underneath that, and we're still processing it ourselves to try and figure out how we're going to incorporate it, how we're going to adapt to it. But among a few of the targets, one is that PREPARE sets forth this ambitious target of really helping 500 million people to adapt and manage to the impacts of climate change through locally led development. And this is where I think it gets to your question. We want to be able to incorporate the input of the individuals in the countries where we're working who are facing the problem, who are dealing with the problem. We want your input. And so that's one goal, 500 million people over the next 8 years. And then the other target that USAID is focused on is that we are trying to mobilize $150 billion in public and private finance by 2030, kind of focused on climate-related problems. And so that's going to be interesting as we try to work with the private sector and as we work with, potential investors in the climate finance area to try and bring more funding to the problem so that we can deal with it. And I will say there is a new climate strategy that USAID has developed that's open for public comment still. And so if you go to USAID's website and look up the climate strategy, you can provide comments to that strategy. It's open until November 24th. So would welcome anybody on this event tonight to go to that site and leave us your comments. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Richard. That's great to hear that the US is upping their game in terms of supporting climate action, especially thinking back about the few years, and now we can see some great ambitions coming through, though we'd like to see more ambitions coming through because of how urgent the climate crisis is, and there's no time to wait for anything, as we need to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius alive, but also most of the populations in the least developed countries like Uganda are already facing the impacts really brutally. As you know, even this year, a number of people lost their lives from floods, from landslides. And when it comes to the global discussions about the transition to renewable energy, things like that, transition to electric vehicles, for us in Uganda, we are thinking about the biggest population, the biggest percentage of the population has no access to electricity. Water is still a problem in areas like Karamoja. The transport system itself is not designed thinking about climate change. So there are a lot of issues that the least developed countries or the developing countries are still facing and need to be addressed together in climate action. So, okay, so I just wanted to follow up on what you talked about, and I wanted you to give us a vision of what you think resilient communities could be like. When you think about resilient communities in Uganda, what is that image that comes into your mind?
Yeah, it's interesting because resilience is a core part of our strategy, not just in climate change, but in everything, with health, with livelihood, with the ability to earn a living and provide for a family. Resilience is key because so many families in Uganda, like I said, are on that razor's edge and can easily be tipped. One shock in their life, the breadwinner getting sick or getting hit by a boda, anything can happen to suddenly make that family vulnerable. And among those issues is climate change. And to me, a resilient community is one that is aware of the potential issues. They can see what's coming, and so they can be prepared in advance. To me, resilience is all about preparation. And the only way preparation can happen is if people have knowledge. They have to be able to see what's coming. They have to be able to anticipate it. But then they also have to have resources. And they have to be able to have the resources to respond. And so that knowledge and the resources are essential for any form of resilience. And when you're talking about resilience to climate change, for a community to be able to adapt, that could take any number of forms. If there's a community that sees drought as becoming more and more likely, then what do they have to do? What's the knowledge they need? Well, maybe it's drought-resistant plants. Maybe it's irrigation. Maybe, it's picking up, moving away from agriculture altogether. And maybe there's some other form of livelihood that they can do that's not going to be affected by drought. So that knowledge of what's possible, what they can do, and then it's the resources to be able to do it. It's education, it's being healthy, it's having access to finance, it's having government services that are available without corruption, without fraud, so that they can rely on these services to be able to help them. Maybe it's inputs, seeds that are more drought resistant is one of the things that we're doing. We're actually working with NARO to develop more drought resistant seeds that we can then help to get to farmers. And these are quality inputs, they're quality seeds. And if they can get to farmers and farmers know how to plant these and how to produce a very high level of harvest, they're going to be better off with regard to droughts. But that doesn't protect them from other things. And so it's this process where we have to think about all the different possibilities. They have to have that knowledge. The government leaders at the local level have to have the knowledge to be able to help mobilize and organize and help the communities do it. But in some cases where the government's maybe not trained or maybe they don't know, locals, youth even, can start to take up the challenge and start to encourage the conversation to happen within their little community, within the village even. To say, what are we going to do? And sometimes maybe it's the youth voice that's going to get, the older people to snap out of their normal way of thinking and start to figure out what they can do to adapt and prepare.
Yeah, wow, that's so inspiring, Richard. And I think it actually kind of touched my next question, which was going to talk about climate change education. When I was doing my undergraduate degree at Makerere University, I was involved in one of the programs with MOCRI and FHI, and it was supported by the USAID, and it was on climate change education and things like that. But as we look at Uganda, you realize that the biggest number of young people and local communities do not actually know about climate change. They have experienced the impacts. They, especially the older generation, they know that things are getting bad. The droughts are becoming frequent, but they don't know why that is happening. And they have a little bit of local knowledge on what they can do, but there's not much scientific support to ensure that the indigenous and local knowledge actually helps them to adapt to climate change. So what is it that the USAID is doing to ensure climate education goes through, climate education and climate awareness is raised in the country, especially recognizing that there's a part of like pushing curriculum and teaching about climate change in schools, but that may not happen as fast as we need to. So what are other ways that the mission is working on ensuring climate change awareness and climate change education within the local communities and young people?
Thank you. Let me make a point about that first. The organization that has the primary responsibility in this space is the government. Government of Uganda has the primary responsibility for the education of its citizens, and they must do this. Schools need to be open, and this has to be part of the curriculum. Teachers have to be trained. The knowledge has to spread. That's the only sustainable way for this to happen. Donors like us can come in with programs and do education events or whatever here and there, and that'll have beneficial effects here and there, but it's not going to be the long-term solution. The government has to do this, and so the various ministries need to be on board and recognize this is an issue. So how does that happen? Well, how do you get government to do something? This is where you guys come in as a voice of the youth. Okay, how do you have access to the government? It's through your representatives, right? This is a democracy. You send parliamentarians to go back to come to Kampala and represent you and their constituency. You are part of their constituency. So you need to talk to your parliamentarians. I do this at home. When I have an issue, I send a message to my congressman or my senator, and I tell them, hey, I feel that you need to focus on this. And if enough people are doing that, they will do that because they want your vote. And so they'll do what you're asking. And that's a government that's responsive to its citizens. That's the way it should work. And so I would first and foremost encourage all of you to continue to have events like this, to create awareness among the youth, the people who are passionate about these kinds of things, to then figure out ways to communicate, to send a message to your government that this is important to us. Please look at this. We have to increase education. We have to increase awareness of the problem. So I would encourage all of you to think about that in terms of what you can do. And I know you're already doing it. I mean, you've organized this. You're hosting it. Right now, in terms of what USAID is doing, I mean, this is part of our analysis. We have regular communications campaigns that we do on the health side. We do communications campaigns on other topics. This is an area that we have not done much on to date because of lack of funding, like I was telling you about. But this is definitely an area, as we look forward to this coming year and our new strategy, more messaging around climate issues should be considered. It should be definitely a part of it. We also have education programming that we're doing. And as we do that, climate change should be a part of that as well. Let me just say one thing here. I had a friend once tell me a story about some men who were trying to move a piano, a large, heavy piano. And as they were all gathered around the piano, they were, some were trying to help on one area. They all were trying to move to the heavy end of the piano. And there wasn't a lot of coordination. And everyone wanted to be like at the most difficult part of the piano where it was heaviest. And finally, someone told everyone, wait, listen, everyone just stand around the piano and lift where you stand. And that way they could lift the piano and they could move it with everyone lifting where they stand. And to me, that's a message for all of us, including all of you. You may be looking for grand ways to make a difference. You may be looking for ways that you can, convince the leaders of the nation to change, where really, if we all start where within our own sphere of influence, start with your family, start with your friends, start with your community leaders who you know, and start talking to them. And if enough young people start doing that and lifting where they stand, that will create the movement. And that will create a greater awareness that will spread, as it'll be like a virus, right? And it'll spread as knowledge of this issue becomes important to people, and it starts moving throughout communities.
That's very interesting, because Sembaji Ronald is writing and saying he completely agrees, and he thinks that adopting a hybrid approach for bottom-up and up-bottom approaches is the only way proper implementation of plans and policies will come through. And it's also interesting that someone had asked a question like, what is the role of young people? What do you think is the role of young people in building community resilience? And I think you've hinted on that on that by saying that the young people need to take charge, need to hold our leaders accountable. We need to start in whatever scale that we can, like a small, simple initiative like My Tree initiative can create a lot of impact and great impact to the community, to the biodiversity, to the green cover and everything. So we don't need to always start big. We can start from wherever we are to create impact. And I think this is just like, I don't know if it's a personal question or anything. I just wanted to know, do you feel guilty being coming from the US, and the US being one of the major emitters and a cause of climate change?
It's a good question. I've never been asked that before. I would say, yeah. I mean, I think there is I don't know if guilt is the right word, but I think it's awareness that, the US and other industrialized nations followed a path of economic development that really did not consider a lot of the environmental impacts that it would have until it was too late. And so I think there has been now, for the last several decades, a reckoning, and there's been an awareness of, hey, this is a problem. We have been a major contributor of this problem. And so we need to actually be responsible and take action to try and solve. I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing some of these now large commitments by the US government to try and address this problem globally. And while we're still fighting the fight domestically to try and, figure out how we can improve within the United States, because there's a lot of room for improvement in the United States. I come from the state of Utah out in the West, and there's hardly any public transportation. And it was built up on a model that envisioned cars, automobiles, as the mode of transportation. So everybody has a car. If you don't have a car, you can't live.